Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Melbourne Traditionalists podcast, episode 83. I'm Mark Moncrief from Upon Hope, and I have with me the editor of XYZ, Mr. David Hiscox. How are you?
Mike Birch's head looks like a giant penis. I'm great.
Yes, that's how we detract the attention of ASIO, by insulting its Director General.
Yeah. Well, the devil hates to be mocked.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah. It really says all you need to know. Like our security, the security of this country, is under the hands of a man whose head looks like a giant penis. I know.
At the right angle, I've seen some really terrible pictures of him.
I know. I put my face on camera, so I know I shouldn't throw stones in a glass house, but I've got nothing on that guy.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Now we're going to come back to ASIO because they've been quite active recently.
They've been trolling a lot and harassing and stalking people. Yeah.
But we're going to start with the natural disasters in New South Wales, the floods. So I read one town and it had 405 millimetres of rain in one day. So that's like 4 months worth of rain in one day. So if you've seen any of the footage from New South Wales, it's quite amazing just how much water there is. Large areas flooded, entire towns evacuated. Yeah, and you were telling me off air that you had some things that you wanted to point out about it.
Well, yeah. What's intrigued me about the coverage that I have witnessed on the mainstream media, because I still do like to inject myself with poison every now and then.
Yep.
They just seem in utter shock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, there'd be droughts one year and bushfires, and then floods the next. Often in the same year, often within the same month of each other.
Yeah.
And we would learn Dorothy McCullough's great poem about a land of drought and flooding rains.
Yes.
And I just had this idea when I was a kid that we'd figure a technological way to figure a lot of these things out.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a science fiction piece which I never finished in grade 6 about how we'd turned the inland of Australia green.
Yep.
I just figured, I watched Star Wars. Maybe we won't have Death Stars. That'd be cool, but we'll find a way just to sort out a lot of these things out.
Mm-hmm.
But then this guy came along in the early 2000s and said that it would never rain again.
Yes, Tim Flannery.
And he said that even the rain that does fall will not be enough to fill our river systems and our dams.
Yep.
And so from that point, this is at least my perception. It definitely started earlier, but that was a watershed moment for Australia's approach to the climate and just the way that it manages the land.
Yeah.
Because we locked up state forests and stopped managing them, which has led to ridiculous bushfires, which we shouldn't.
Like we had last year.
Yeah. Which we shouldn't have.
Yep.
If we actually manage the land properly.
Yep.
And it's meant that our approach to water has been that it will never rain again, and the rain that does fall will never fill up the dams.
Mm-hmm.
A few years ago, when the downtown Brisbane flooded,
Yep, I remember that.
I don't think I read the report, but I read enough stuff about the report. And everything I read about the report into that disaster was that there was this unstated assumption behind all of it that just defied logic. Like, if your dam is filling up and you're getting forecasts that there's going to be heavy rain in several months' time, the logical thing to do would be to release the water.
Yep.
But you've got this overriding assumption that it's never going to rain again, and the rain that does fall will not be enough to fill up the dams.
Yep.
And so then by the time you're nearly full and the rains are coming, it's too late. You've got to release the water, you cause floods. So that was actually never addressed by the Wivenhoe Dam investigation, and it's a woeful investigation. Like they just swept that underlying assumption under the carpet, and so we're seeing the same thing here again in Sydney. Like, we have these things called dams which we can build.
Yep.
They're not going to stop flooding, but they're going to mitigate flooding. And if you manage them properly and you release rain early enough in the season, again, you're going to mitigate flooding. What's going on right now, it is a man-made event, it's a bureaucratic event. It's not climate change, it's idiocy.
Well, yeah, I tend to agree. You know, we've got this idea where there's no real, what's the right word I'm looking for? There's a completely unrealistic expectations about what dams exist for.
Yes.
And that there'll be never be a problem with them, which is obviously incorrect. It can't be correct. There's always going to be a problem. And, you know, they have these disaster plans, but they don't believe them.
Yes.
You know, so they filled them in not because there's going to be a disaster, but because, hey, that's what the legislation requires. And we see this all over, don't we?
Where they blame the process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than going, what did we do wrong?
Yeah. But also, I mean, you know, when you were in grade 6, maybe it was understandable that you thought that, you know, we were going to have a technological answer to this. But I don't think there is a technological answer.
It's why I use the term mitigate rather than stop, I guess.
Possibly.
Yeah.
But I guess it's also like the climate change idea that, you know, we're so powerful that we can turn the thermostat up or down. You know, we can decide how much it rains. We can decide how much. Well, we can't. We can't. You know, as you said, mitigate. Yeah. You know, you can do things to, you know, put insulation on your windows. You know, but you can't stop the sun from shining.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically it. That's what I see going on right now. Like, as I said, like, it's like I'm hearing this shock in the voices of the people who are reporting on this, because I think they genuinely didn't think this was going to happen again. I think they thought it was going to be all bushfires and drought, and not flooding. I genuinely think that's what they genuinely thought.
Well, it is quite remarkable that we're, you know, just over a year from the massive bushfires, and here we are with these massive floods. But they're also saying that this is a once-in-a-century event.
They have to, don't they?
Well, I mean, it's probably once in a 50-year event.
I remember seeing footage of floods all throughout my life on television. And I remember hearing about how bad the flood was not that long before I was born. So yeah, this once in a century, like, I think that's one of those terms that they've come up in a working group. You know what I mean? Like, how do we sort of explain this away?
I think it's in the style manual. What do we say about this? Yeah, there you go. Turn to the page. Oh, here we go. Here's the phrases we use.
This is a checks notes once in a century event.
And in fact, you never hear like once in a decade or once in a quarter century, or it's always a century. It's a little bit suspicious, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not once every 7 years due to El Nino or El Nina. La Nina is, you know.
Exactly. ASIO.
Penis head.
Now, I actually have an article here from...
Penis head.
from SBS. The Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, ASIO, will stop referring to right-wing extremism and Islamic extremism to talk about violent threats, saying the labels are no longer fit for purpose. Declaring his second annual threat assessment in Canberra, ASIO Director General Mike Burgess
Penis head.
also revealed violent extremists and foreign spies have posed new online challenges during the coronavirus pandemic. From Wednesday, ASIO will start referring to ideologically motivated violent extremism and religiously motivated violent extremism, two umbrella categories that better describe the phenomena security agency are seeing, Mr. Burgess said. Words matter. They can be very powerful in how they frame an issue and how they make people think about issues. ASIO does not investigate people solely because of their political views, so labels like left and right often distract from the real nature of the threat, he said on Wednesday night, reiterating ASIO's focus is the threat of violence. In the same way, we don't investigate people because of their religious views. Again, it's violence that is relevant to our powers, but that's not always clear when we use the term Islamic extremism. Mr. Burgess said the term Islamic extremism can be seen by Muslim groups as damaging and misrepresentative of Islam, and one that stigmatises them by encouraging stereotyping and stoking division. He added ASIO's language needs to evolve to match the evolving threat environment. Last year, Mr. Burgess used his threat assessment to warn of the real and growing threat of what he now labels so-called right extremism. On Wednesday night, he said ideological extremism investigations have grown from 30% to 40% of ASIO's counter-terrorism caseload. The face of the threat is also evolving. Mr. Burgess explained security agencies are seeing a growing number of individuals that don't fit on the left-right spectrum at all. Instead, they're motivated by a fear of societal collapse or a specific social or economic grievance or conspiracy. People often think we're talking about skinheads with swastika tattoos and jackboots roaming the streets like extras from Romper Stomper, but it's no longer that obvious, he said. More often than not, they are young, well-educated, articulate and middle class, and not easily identified. Mr. Burgess said the average age of these investigative subjects is 25, and that he was particularly concerned by the number of overwhelmingly male 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds who are being radicalised. He said such investigations have occurred in all Australian states and territories, and that the threat from this form of extremism may well grow. Mr. Burgess said violent extremists and foreign spies have taken to the internet during the coronavirus pandemic, posing a new range of challenges. He said for those intent on violence, more time at home meant more time in the echo chamber of the internet on the pathway to radicalisation. They were able to access hate-filled manifestos and attack instructions without some of the usual circuit breakers that contact with community provides, he said. Extreme right-wing propaganda used COVID to portray governments as oppressors and globalisation, multiculturalism and democracy as flawed and failing. Islamic extremist narratives portrayed the pandemic as divine retribution against the West for the perceived persecution of Muslims.
Where's the lie?
He said in the case of foreign spies, the lack of opportunity for international travel and reduced social mobility meant their tradecraft evolved and they increased their online activity and approaches. Espionage and foreign interference continued to be levelled at not only the federal government but all Australian states and territories. Mr. Burgess said ASIO last year investigated a nest of foreign spies targeting relationships with current and former politicians, a foreign embassy and a state police service. They successfully cultivated and recruited an Australian government security clearance holder who had access to sensitive details of defence technology, he said. ASIO investigated, identified and verified the activity, cancelling the government employee security clearance, confronted the foreign spies and quietly and professionally removed them from Australia, Mr. Burgess said. He added the total number of foreign spies and their proxies who have either been removed from Australia or rendered inoperative in the last year was in double figures. Mr. Burgess, who last year argued the threat Australia faced from foreign espionage and interference activities was higher now than it was at the height of the Cold War, said such levels are no longer unprecedented. Now that was a whole article, and there's a lot in there.
It's amazing.
To talk about.
It's amazing. If we go for an hour, it doesn't bother me. There's so much in there. There really is so much in there. It's intriguing that he wants to make it clear that the term Islamic extremism could misrepresent Islam, but so-called right-wing extremism doesn't misrepresent ordinary Australians who just want their country back.
Well, at the same time, he said that he's going to mix in basically ideologically motivated violent extremism. So if I'm an anarchist and I want to blow up Parliament,
then you're fine.
Then, well, I'm in
Apparently.
the same. I'm an ideologically motivated violent extremist. But if you want to post up stickers, you're also an ideologically motivated violent extremism.
Yeah, yeah. That is that's kind of like my first take on it. They have broadened the definition.
Yeah.
Of, they've done a bait and switch since 9/11. Where it was originally Islamic terrorism, then it was just terrorism, then it was violent extremism, now it's extremism.
Yeah.
And so now they're broadening the language to basically define anybody who they see as a challenge to the political system as a so-called right-wing extremist, i.e. that's what they mean when they say, that's what they say when they mean terrorist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it's... They're basically saying, yeah, we want to watch everybody and we want to find a way to make it okay for us to lock these people up. Like we want to... You can see it as an intention to turn Australia into a police state. The other take on it, though, is that they've backed off. Because they're like, hey, we realise that we've tried to portray... these so-called right-wing violent extremists as lunatics, as these cartoon characters. Yeah, but they're not. They're young. Thank you. They're well-educated. Thank you. They're articulate. Thank you. And they're middle class. See, he reads the XYZ.
He probably does.
Yeah. Go by everything that he said there. Yeah, I think he does. And they realize that we're intelligent, and they know that we know how they operate, and they know how we operate. So they're trying to redefine how we operate to fit their cartoon characterization.
Well, I must say that they're doing a lot better than the police, because what's obvious is the police don't have any idea who we are or what we believe. And by who we are, they might have our photo, they might have our name, they might have our address, but they don't know anything about us. You know, they
good.
Well, they think, you know, oh, these people are criminals, and that's how they think of people. And ASIO seems to be a little bit more sophisticated than that, and they actually do ask the question, why?
Yes.
But at the same time, they don't have any answers, and it's not their job to have answers.
True.
But that's a problem, because it means that they're saying that there's an issue, there's a problem, but there's no end to it.
You're saying that they're just doing their job. They're following orders.
Well, they are just following orders. That's exactly right. Yeah, it's interesting that you know, there's still, will Islamic extremism on the news disappear? Oh no, never. It's still going to go on. Yes. Right. There's still plots out there. There's still hatred. This has been imported, and you know, on purpose. Yes. And now they're saying, oh, we're shocked that this has become an issue. You know, even though they were warned at every stage that this was the inevitable result of multiculturalism and mass immigration. But will they just be able to say, oh, it's just religiously motivated violence, and we don't, you know, it could be Mormons. It could be Mormons. Yeah. You know? Yeah, yeah. You just can't say. No one can tell. You know, is that part of that? Is this about actually trying to make things clearer, or is this about trying to make things muddier? Absolutely muddier. They try to make, as you said it just before, like you compared an anarchist who literally does want to blow up Parliament, compared to us who are literally just putting our material out there and educating people on what we actually believe, and educating people on their own replacement. You know, making it obvious, stopping it from being a silent replacement, making it something that everybody's aware of all the time. That's all we're doing, you know. So they're trying to make genuine nationalist political activism the equivalent of
trucks of peace running down people in the street.
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to make equivalent. And they're trying to... so that's one equivalence. Another equivalence is saying we're shocked that there seems to be this rise of extremism, both from certain...
Well, there's the thing. They
Islam.
actually seem like they are genuinely shocked.
Yes.
And to you and I, it's the obvious outcome.
Yes, because like, what did you think we were going to do when we saw that our government was importing terrorists and they can mow people down, but you never really do anything about it? And we make the conclusion, well, we've got to do something about it ourselves.
Well, it's not just the problem of Islam, it's the problem of immigration in total, it's the problem of feminism, it's this problem of the massive debt that we're in, the economic insecurity that we're in. You can't plan for life. That's a pretty big issue.
Liberalism.
Yeah, exactly. Liberalism. And where these issues are ignored. And what happens when you're a young man and you're like, what do I do with my life? Where do I go?
Yes.
And a lot of these guys, I'm surprised that it's not more common. I'm not surprised that it happens at all. But they do seem surprised. They seem genuinely surprised that anybody could have an issue with these things.
Well, regarding the so-called right-wing extremists who have been arrested, the cases against them are extremely flimsy. Like, basically, anybody who's been actually arrested has just been shitposting on the internet. And that's all. I've got like a trove of screenshots from Ryan Fletcher, because he has people direct messaging him on Gab and those boards, where they're trying to entrap him into saying something violent or agreeing with something violent. And Ryan Fletcher understands how these guys operate. And he just calls it out and that sort of stuff. And so that's why the case against Ryan is just so flimsy and nothing's happened.
And, he's a classic example of just how badly people on our side are treated.
Yes.
He was at a rally and he was attacked by left-wing thugs.
Yes.
He was left bleeding. I believe he had to go to hospital with stitches.
Yes.
The police were within 5-10 metres away.
Yep.
There was no obstruction. They could see what happened. They saw what happened. It's on film. It was filmed.
Yes.
And basically he went to the police and they went, it's not a problem.
Yeah. No one has ever been charged over that.
Yeah.
So coming back to the equivalence angle, so like we've pointed out the false equivalences, but there are some equivalences where it is like genuine equivalences. Well, actually, no, this first one isn't. Islamic terrorism is not a threat to the liberal system. Because they're trying to replace us anyway. A few dead Anglos isn't really going to bother them. Like, maybe on an emotional level, but to the system it doesn't. Because they're trying to replace us anyway. The only way that it is a threat is that it does provoke genuine nationalist opposition to the liberal system. It's our political activism which is actually a genuine threat. So in that respect, like, it's completely understandable that they are trying to make them equivalent, because we offer a genuinely different direction to the liberal system.
No, I think you're right there. And the whatever an immigrant group does, it's the immigrants are here as a solvent. Their job is to break us up, to atomize us. So whatever they do, good or bad, that's doing the job. Whereas you and I actually opposing the system, well, obviously we're not doing that, are we?
No.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting. I reckon this is the best take I have on it. I find it interesting that they're relabeling right-wing extremism as ideologically motivated extremism, and they're relabeling genuine Islamic terrorism as religiously motivated extremism.
Yeah.
You can make the case that in both cases, like, neither is really true. Both are actually racially motivated political activism. So we have racially motivated political activism because we understand that we're being replaced. They deliberately mislabel that an ideology. It's an ideological problem that we think it's a problem that we're being replaced.
Yes.
For Muslims, like if you look at, say, the ethnic changes that have happened across the Islamic world, say in Turkey, like Turkey used to be Greece. It was like one of the centres of of European civilization, but now it's full of Turks.
Yes.
You look at the whole of North Africa. Again, it used to be Europe.
Yeah.
But now it's full of Berbers. And even Berbers, you know, that's Berbers used to be us as well. It's full of North Africans, basically. Islam is a religion which is it's an ideology which says that they want to take over the world.
Yes.
But it's essentially a mechanism through which they can push their own racial superiority, or their plans to basically take over the world as their racial group. So at the end of the day, what we're just talking about here is a race war, and ASIO and the government don't want to acknowledge the fact that we are actually in a race war. The government is trying to replace us. They brought in people from overseas who want to replace us.
Yeah.
We don't want to be replaced. At the end of the day, all of this is about race, ethnicity, blood. We don't want to be replaced. It's a race war that's being waged at the moment, and we are waging that race war non-violently, politically. We're just doing genuine political activism. That's what this is about. But that's what ASIO don't want to acknowledge.
Well, I don't know whether that's accurate. I don't know whether they don't want to acknowledge that. I actually think that they've been fairly above board with what they want. And I must say that I do think ASIO is generally different to the FBI, for example.
Okay.
The FBI has a reputation for, sting operations and for, trying to encourage people to go further.
Yes, I think ASIO,
and I don't personally know of a case of ASIO doing that.
Okay.
I know of people who have been approached by ASIO, to be informants. But I've never heard of a case of where they've actually tried to agitate for more, for people to become more extreme.
I do want to lay out at some stage the evidence that we have that Ryan Fletcher has accumulated, because I think a sting was attempted against him.
Yeah. That doesn't mean it was by ASIO though.
Correct.
But I don't have any doubt that Ryan has been targeted.
Absolutely. Good point.
I actually saw something funny on the internet. There was a photo of a quite attractive young woman. She's got a green army jacket on, and she's holding a M16. And she says, "Oh, I'm new to the chat. Where can I, where can I talk to somebody?" And everybody's response was basically yours. Yeah. Like, go away, FBI.
Yeah. Hello, fellow racists. I'm a racist just like you. I hate black people. Tell me what we're going to do.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I had a good chuckle at that, as you have.
Yeah. You can't see me on camera, like I face palmed, basically. Yeah. I see. That's a common meme. Yeah.
Now, the other thing about the ASIO is how they're talking about foreign spies.
This is the big one. And naturally, they've hidden it at the bottom of the article, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. It's right at the bottom of the article. A nest of foreign spies successfully cultivated and recruited an Australian government security clearance holder who had access to sensitive details of defence technology. Now, I've met people who have high security clearance, and they go through you like a dose of salt. Right. You have to fill out, like a 30-page questionnaire, and just, incredible amount of stuff, and they go through, you know, your background and your parents' backgrounds, and you know, they don't mess around. So for someone to actually have for someone to have been recruited who has a security holding, that's actually a pretty big deal. And it sounds from this that basically they went, oh, you've been a naughty boy, we're taking away your security clearance, go back to work.
Pardon me. Yep. Well,
and certainly, and here it says, quietly and professionally remove them from Australia. So they caught these spies, and then they just went, oh, there's the airport, bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
Well, that's really going to discourage people from spying on Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Thomas Sewell pointed out, and I shared this video on the XYZ YouTube channel. If this had happened in the Middle East, there would be, at the very least, show trials.
Yeah.
There would be a long prison sentence, and we know what happens in Middle Eastern prisons. Yeah. None of that here.
Yeah.
Having said that, it is refreshing. Just like the impression I get from this article is that ASIO have backed off and realised that they need to take another attack, and they're actually getting back to the business of actually doing their job.
Well, let's hope so, because I mean, when they're saying that, you know, they've gone from 30% to 40% of looking at you know, right wing. You do wonder, hey, what are you doing with the 60%?
Yeah.
Because there's the real threat there.
Yes. Yeah. A nest of foreign spies, like a whole bunch of them.
So a network, really. Yeah.
And it'd be interesting just to know, like, what those foreign spies think of our domestic policy as well. Like, if you think of people who are paid by foreign powers to influence the domestic policy of Australia, and to harass and intimidate and very poorly incite ridicule of, and to stalk, and to constantly like harass all the people that you know in the media about people in Australia with whom you disagree. Surely that would label you as a spy. Like if you're doing this on behalf of a foreign power, if you're being either maybe not paid directly by that foreign power, but being funded by sources outside of Australia to influence Australia's domestic policy. Maybe ASIO should be having a look at those kinds of people as well.
Well, you think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I'm going to do a bit of a segue here. And yesterday there was a conference in Anchorage, Alaska, between the United States and China. And they were supposed to start with a 2-minute introduction. So, you know, the Americans would speak for 2 minutes, the Chinese would speak for 2 minutes. So the Americans spoke for 2 minutes, and they basically talked about how, you know, they wanted to encourage human rights, and they weren't, you know, they were a bit disappointed with what was going on in China and so forth. So so the Chinese delegate got up and spoke for 20 minutes, basically denouncing America as if it was the height of the Cold War and they were the Soviet Union. Things aren't getting better in the world.
No. I hear that Joe Biden gave Blinken, who was the US representative, a hard time about bringing along somebody with purple hair. But Joe Biden is the guy who literally put a guy who thinks he's a woman in charge of the health.
He's an assistant secretary.
Assistant secretary for health. Yes. Basically, this is what happens when America is weak. Other countries realize that they can be more assertive.
If I was China, I'd be pulling exactly the same nonsense.
Yeah, I think China have been. I think this is just a portent of things to come.
I agree. I agree, and it means that, you know, the Democrats have a habit of overreacting to things. I mean, last week Joe Biden called Putin a killer.
Wow.
And he said that he looked into his eyes and he said, "You have no soul." And so Putin he did a press conference where he basically said to resident Biden,
Resident.
Not president, because he didn't win the election, did he?
No.
That he wished him well. He wished him good health.
Wow.
And he said, I'm not being sarcastic or manipulative in any way, you know. And as someone said, yeah, when it's Putin, you really have to put those extra words in, don't you?
Well,
but again, you know, they're creating an enemy that doesn't need to be there. I mean, Russia might not be our friend, but it doesn't have to be our enemy either.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
You know?
They're a white country.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're not communists anymore. They're authoritarian, but these days that's the least of our worries.
Yeah,
I noted on Sunday that it's interesting that the media have made a bit of a big deal about Joe Biden falling down the stairs.
Yep.
When Hillary Clinton had repeated stumbles, she had literal seizures, and she had this bizarre way of trying to cover the fact that she had a seizure right in front of the cameras, surrounded by reporters, like a meter away from her. The media just carried on as though nothing was going on. So it's not a case of there's no way they could hide that. Like, he fell down the stairs, you got to show it. It's like, no, that they can literally steal an election and carry on as though nothing has ever happened. They can ring Washington DC in a ring of steel and carry on as though it's completely normal.
Yeah.
If they want to pretend that something didn't happen, they can do that. The Premier of Victoria,
isn't that a joke?
can fall down the stairs and just disappear. This guy who's been on camera 24/7 for hours every single day for a year, just disappears, and he's in hospital. But it's normal.
And they released a photo of him in hospital.
Yes.
And he looks like nothing's happened.
Yeah.
So which is it? Has nothing happened, or is the photo doctored?
Yeah. And so this isn't conspiratorial. We're saying, look, these are the facts.
Facts, exactly.
And what we're seeing don't line up with the facts.
Yeah.
So I find it intriguing that they've allowed this stuff about Biden to be actually spread around. And this footage of Biden, I'm referring to, he referred to Kamala Harris as president-elect a few months ago, and now, just the other day, he referred to her as president. Yeah. So there's senility, but there's also Freudian slips. I don't like using the term Freudian, but you know where I'm going with this. It's really intriguing. They're basically, we could all see Joe Biden going downhill, and it's clear, okay, they want their first black female president, and they're going to get her. And that's just the start of it, really, I think. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that they've bitten off a lot more than they can chew, and I think that they thought, and this is a common idea, is, I hear it on our side all the time. When we won't win power, then there'll be, all these things will change. But of course, once you've won power, then you have a whole bunch of new problems. Right?
Yes.
And that's what's happened to the Democrats, is they thought, hey, we've got to beat Trump. And they've beaten Trump, and it's like, oh, we've got all these new problems. And I don't think they really thought about them.
Absolutely not. Yes.
And now they're starting to pop up. And, every president gets and most, prime ministers and so forth, get a honeymoon period. And, occasionally it doesn't happen, but, they're Democrats, the reporters, they support the Democratic Party, they've got a Democratic president. So now they're starting to say, oh, hold on, he's not doing everything that we like. Because I think the reporters are a lot more to the left than Biden is.
Absolutely, yes.
And so he's not giving them... He's playing a lot like President Clinton, as in he talks a really left-wing talk, but in the main, he's not that radical. That doesn't mean he won't do radical things, but it's here and there. It's not the whole agenda. And I think Harris will be the same.
Okay. Yeah.
But there will be areas where it's pushed, and this is the problem: is it's not that they push; it's that when the Republicans get back in, they don't push back.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yes. That's how it just creeps forward.
Exactly, and it's the same everywhere in the world.
That's how they. that's how, Bill Clinton cannot be as left-wing as the reporters wanted him to be.
Yeah.
But that's how we can still have a so-called transgender Assistant Secretary of State in 2021.
Oh, Biden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just going back to the international stuff as well, like I'm still sort of thinking over a lot of my former arguments that I used to make about foreign policy before I got red-pilled. But one of the things that is still absolutely spot on, people are going to find out just how dangerous the world can be without a United States empire.
Yeah.
And an assertive China and Russia doing whatever it wants to do.
Well, I agree. People, when the United States stops being the world power, people are going to miss it really quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're just seeing like with just a weak president, it's like this.
Yeah.
What happens if America has really serious internal strife? All bets are off, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, for Australia, that's a really serious problem.
Yeah.
Because things in America are not getting better like everywhere else; they're getting worse. And one of the symptoms of that is so many people can't see how bad things are getting. And that's one of the things that I just keep bumping up against these people who are convinced that, hey, everything's normal, everything's fine. Because
diversity is our strength. Like, people look at how many Chinese are here and go, well, this is multiculturalism, it's great. How good's the food?
That's what it's supposed to be.
But
the problem is the policy itself. You know?
Yeah. If you're playing Civilization, and you're a main power and like there's another main power and you have smaller allies and like you're like, well, I can see that long term that rival power is going to disintegrate. Let's just get 1 million of our people into a country of 25 to 30 million people, and just plant them there and just keep sending them over there. So when that rival power goes down, we have a colony. Like if you have to just always think in terms of strategy, like you're playing a game, like you're playing a computer game. It is a game. A real life game with real life consequences with people's lives. But this is exactly what's going on. And that's what we're up against. And Penis Head, if he's listening, I hope they're thinking about this. Because what we've just laid out there is exactly what's going on. America is deteriorating and is breaking up. Our biggest regional rival has 1 million of its people here and nearly 2 billion of it more back where they come from. We're about to lose the shield, which has been able to essentially keep Australia free and safe and prosperous. What do you think is going to happen? There are 1 million of them here already.
Exactly.
And as much as they go on about multiculturalism, they have fealty to their home, not to Australia.
Absolutely. And there's the big secret of everyone in this multicultural society. I remember asking an Italian, hey, if there was a war between Italy and Australia, who would you fight for? He answered without hesitation.
That's
Italy.
Italians. And that's just the Italians.
And that's the Italians, you know. So it's
who do you
exactly the same.
Who do you think they barrack for in the soccer?
You know? Exactly. All right, well, I think we'll leave it there.
We could go on, let's call it.
David, where can people find more of your thoughts?
Come to xyz.net.au. Also come to Telegram. I've recently been called out for stealing people's stuff, so I will. I promise that I will do my best to share rather than just copying pictures and then re-uploading. I will share from other people's Telegrams channels. That's just a boomer tech thing. But find us on Telegram as well. That one's growing. We're pushing up to 1,000. So come along to that and But otherwise, just. As I always say, bypass social media, come straight to the website, xyz.net.au.
Yep, and you can find out more of my thinking Upon Hope, and you can also listen to this on Podbean.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, and hopefully I'll speak to you again next week. Bye-bye.